Your opinion on consolidating schools to save money and share resources. How should this be decided? Referendum, town council, boards of ed, other.
Well, first of all, as an elected official, I would want to hear what the taxpayers want to do. We have our neighborhood schools, and this was reviewed several years ago, and the consensus then seemed that people wanted to keep the schools. Also, there are going to be fiscal realities, and we may have to make some hard choices down the road, but it's way too early for me to make those kinds of decisions here in a debate.
And Charles?
Well, I'd have to mirror David's sentiments with respect to the schools. I do know that with respect to when we had the discussion a few years back, and the townsfolk were polled as to what they wanted to do, and they want to keep the neighborhood schools. I don't think closing 3 schools and building some big monstrosity in the center of town with the state with its continued fiscal crisis and our bond rating continually being dropped is going to make it any easier for us to borrow, let alone build new schools. All of our schools are structurally sound buildings. They were analyzed by the same company that came in and decided they wanted to come in afterwards 5 years later, and they wanted to destroy them all. So I say going forward, we would have to poll townspeople and see what they say first.
I can only echo that statement, is that it's really up to the taxpayers of town to decide what we want to do with schools. It's not up to me. My kids are through the school system. I have a grandchild attending Goodwin now. I mean, that's my only concern. It's up to the taxpayers of this town what they want to do with our schools, and it should be communicated well from the council to the townspeople, the options that we have.
Peter?
Yeah, this is, other than the state budget, which thankfully we have some good news, this is, I think, the most pressing issue, and it's been for a number of years in town. And by consolidation, and interpret that, of course, we're talking within the town of Mansfield. And it would be nice to have the 3 schools. I mean, I grew up with that, 3 schools, our kids went through it, that kind of system. But the fact is, it's not affordable. We knew it wasn't affordable. It simply costs more to run 3 schools, student population, and those costs will increase and will soon surpass the cost of construction. So whether it's 3 schools, 2 schools, or 1 school, that will definitely be decided by the voters. It has to be, out of fairness, but also practicality. If any schools are built, there will be a referendum for the bonding, and that'll be maybe the last opportunity, or one of the last opportunities to decide, but there'll be numerous opportunities beforehand. This is absolutely a community decision, but it's going to be driven as well by how the state reimburses schools construction and our population and educational needs.
First of all, the educational program is under the legal control of the Board of Ed. So educational program and what goes on in the schools is outside the council's responsibility. However, the buildings are owned by the town. So if you're going to talk about building, you do need to have, it has to be a council response and decision making. So we usually have a building committee that's made up of school people and townspeople. At this moment, the school board is undergoing a process which the public is invited to engage in which they discuss what the community wants for schools. Their goal is, when they come up with a proposal, that it is based entirely on input and on input from the community, and I'm hoping that there continues to be input once they have reached some kind of conclusion. Peter is right, any bond authorization has to go to the voters, and it will.
Ben?
I agree with what Tony and Peter said, and I think the direct answer to this question is it's going to be part of all 3. The Board of Education has a significant role in planning this and collecting public input, and the Town Council has a role in deciding future capital needs of the town, and ultimately, like Tony said, she's absolutely right. Any bond authorization for construction has to go to voters for referendum. I would encourage everyone who cares about this, no matter how you feel, to stay engaged in this process as the Board of Ed works through the initial planning stage. And I also want to just, the question asked about fiscal prudence for the town, and we just talked about that in the last answer. We have the lowest tax rate of any surrounding town, and our taxes have gone down 3 times in the last 10 years, which is not something that can be said in almost any other town in the state. So we talk about fiscal prudence, but there aren't any ideas. The Democrats have done it.
Look, we have to understand what what is happening to the school population. Right now, we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 700, 720, or more like 700 students in our elementary schools, our 3 elementary schools. There are many, many towns in the state that have that many students in 1 elementary school. And some of the best towns, Westport, Weston, they have 700 plus students in 1 school. Now the concern is neighborhood schools. Face it, we do not have neighborhood schools. Everybody takes a bus to school, with the exception of maybe 20 kids in the whole town. We have to realize what's happening and we have to respond to it. The Board of Ed has the first priority. They're doing it right now. And then if they choose to build a new school, then it will be the council's responsibility. And I hope they do.
With regard to the question, who decides on consolidating schools, what Bill has said is correct. The ball is in the Board of Education's court. The Democrats have a majority on the Board of Education. Republicans have chosen not to contest any seats. And I would say the Board of Education discusses and conducts its business on a very, very much of a nonpartisan basis. They have to make the initial decision. What are they doing now? They're having a meeting in council chambers, and then there are going to be meetings around town, sponsored and organized by PTAs, PTOs, to try and get the maximum input. The mistake that was done last time was it was a top-down decision from the board leadership, and that they tried to sell. We know that doesn't work. We need to get they need to get the input from at the get-go, and we have an outstanding superintendent, Kelly Lyman, and under her leadership and under the Board of Education's leadership, they're doing just that.
Caitlin?
I understand that the Board of Ed and the Council have different responsibilities, but I do think that this discussion needs to be collaborative and needs to engage all members of the community, regardless of role. And I think we need to consider in this discussion not just the cost of building new facilities, but also the cost of maintaining our existing facilities down the road. How is this going to affect our students long term? And really getting down to the nitty-gritty of how do these facilities affect the quality of education that our students receive? So I think it's really important that we go around the block on all aspects of this issue.
To take a little different slant on the answer here, you've heard that it is a Board of Ed decision, and it is. And the town council, of course, we like to state our piece and communicate with the board as to what we feel should happen. But consolidation doesn't necessarily mean the long-term building of new buildings. It may mean that our census is dropping to the point that we should not keep a 3rd building open. And honestly, that's something that we need to take a look at in this town. The census of our schools, and not the middle school, but the elementary schools, is getting lower and lower. And maintaining a 3rd building with very minimal class sizes is a luxury that we may not be able to continue to afford.
And I think that wraps up our questions.